Hello, my name is Zach Hodge, and my research is THC and CBD, hero from villain. For this research, it's from my last summer's medicinal chemistry course, and my advisor for this project was Dr. Bert Hollingsworth. For my research in this class, I wanted to focus on controversial or unexpected sources of medications for various treatments. This is marijuana, or cannabis, and first I want to give you a brief history of it as a medication, then discuss recent history and the negative stigmas associated with it. Next, discuss the research being done, and finally, tell you why it's actually an important medicinal research topic. As early as 2900 BC, there's a reference to cannabis as a medication. And this is a picture of Emperor Fu Xi, who is credited with bringing civilization to China. He's also supposedly referenced cannabis as a medication with both yin and yang. And this idea continued in China and other cultures independently. Ancient societies such as Greece, Egypt, and India all reference the same different medicinal uses of cannabis. Historians even believe that Jesus used cannabis-infused oil for anointing based on the descriptions in the Bible, and the use of cannabis continued well past the Middle Ages all over the world into modern times. Its use was so widespread that settlers even brought cannabis with them to the Americas when colonizing. The most famous colonies in United States history, such as Jamestown, were also famous for their cannabis exports. And everyone knows about the Founding Fathers, but not everyone knows that they were also cannabis growers and users. In 1850, cannabis was added to the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is a big list of all the accepted drugs in the country. Then in 1906, the Food and Drug Act forced labels on all medications, including cannabis, but this was a negative turning point because in 1911, Massachusetts became the first state to outlaw cannabis, and the trend continued. As the federal government tightened its grip on cannabis, Samuel Caldwell became the first person to be convicted for selling cannabis. More laws were passed, and it was soon moved from the pharmacopoeia. There was a split, though, where some reported cannabis's benefits and the others reported it as a terrible drug with no medical uses. Restrictions kept getting tighter on cannabis, and in 1936, the Bureau of Narcotics urged for full control of cannabis by the federal government. More propaganda like films was released until in 1970, with the war on drugs, cannabis was completely demonized and disregarded as a viable medication. One thing that did come out of the war on drugs was the drug scheduling system. It ranks drugs from 1 to 5, where 1 is highly abusable and has no acceptable medical uses, and 5 is being the least likely to be abused. Cannabis got put in Schedule 1 right next to heroin, LSD, and ecstasy, discrediting the long history of cannabis medications. Now that I've explained the climate behind the research, I want to get into the details of what is being done, and to do that, I need to explain receptors briefly. Basically, only certain molecules will interact with certain receptors to produce a response in the body. But this is a very important thing for drug development, because in a medication, if it can't interact with its target, it's useless. The receptors we're interested in are CB1 and CB2, and together they make the endocannabinoid system. These receptors are dispersed all over the body, but a large amount are focused on the central nervous system. These receptors have impact on several neurological disorders, as well as signaling in other systems all over the body. A big part of developing medications is structure-activity relationships, and this diagram shows how that would be used to assign activity to regions of a molecule and look at how they interact with the receptors. By changing these regions slightly, the medication can create a slightly different response in the patient's body and form a better medication. To start altering and improving the medication, we have to have a starting point, and that starting point is pure THC. You can get that by either making it in a lab or extracting it from a plant, and one of the most common ways of extracting it is by sifting it through smaller and smaller screens as seen in the diagram, but it tends to be less pure in this way. This is THC, and it's the primary ingredient in all cannabis medications. And I want to draw your attention to the two sections that the arrows are pointing to, because these are the regions that we focus on altering thanks to our structure-activity relationships. And for a medication, THC leaves the body rather quickly, but while it's in the body, it has some drastic side effects. THC is psychoactive, which means that it alters your brain slightly when it's in your body, and this effect is the high that you feel when smoking cannabis, but can go more extreme into paranoia and anxiety. You want to alter the molecule in the regions I pointed out previously to reduce these effects, but keep the medicinal benefits, and this makes it a more viable medication. This drug is Kesamet, and it's made by altering natural THC in the regions highlighted with the arrows. These small changes actually make the drug more likely to interact with the receptors and drastically minimize any psychoactive effects. It's used to treat nausea and vomiting from chemotherapy patients, and many other drugs use similar techniques. Sativix gets around the psychoactive effects of THC in a different way. It uses a mixture of THC and CBD, as seen on the right, to counteract the psychoactive effect rather than modifying THC itself. CBD actually counteracts many of the negative effects of THC when proportioned correctly, and this medication is used to treat multiple sclerosis and severe cancer pains. CBD is a really interesting substance because while it comes from cannabis and has many of its own health benefits, it's not actually a controlled substance in the US. And this means that we can get lots of CBD products like lotions, oils, and e-cigarettes easily without having to worry about regulations. Now let's say that there's a patient with a severe condition that either can't or doesn't want to use more extreme medications such as opioids. Cannabis-based medications allow a gentler and less addictive option for these patients. Putting yourself in the shoes of these patients, being your loved one, you can quickly see why this research is useful. Another reason this research is so important is because it gives us another option for treatment. Some medications don't work as expected for some patients, and these cannabis-based medications give us another opportunity to treat them. By creating these medications, it allows more diverse options to treat people and give them what they deserve. Here are my references, and thank you very much.